Okay, so if it's visible, we can just go ahead and get started. It's 2:01. Thank you everybody for being here. I really hope that we do get a few more people in as well. Um, yeah, so this is the first event for our Get Out the Vote program that is a part of the Democracy Project of SAAPRI. This initiative is focused on improving the outcome of South Asian voters and also making sure that they are making informed choices on their ballots, primarily for this upcoming election. So today's agenda includes an introduction to the session, an exploration of the candidates, and also a civil discussion. Um, I will be moderating, if my slide will just show it. I will be moderating, and as for the discussion, our goal is to turn chaos into clarity. As facilitators, we are going to keep the session on track and also ensure that everyone participates in discussion in a civil manner. SAPRI is a nonpartisan organization, and we are committed to that even throughout this program. Okay, and Francis, if you wanted to give a quick introduction as to what SAPRI is.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Francis, Communications Associate here at SAAPRI. Just a brief introduction on the organization. SAAPRI is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization established in 2001 with the mission to serve South Asian Americans by using research to formulate equitable and socially responsible policy recommendations. Back to you, Georgina.
Okay, thank you. We're just going to get started with a very quick refresher on voting in general, as well as some basic information that we feel like everybody should know. The 2024 general election is on November 5th, so we're about 30-ish days out. So as a registered voter, you are eligible to vote in person or by mail. We have a few links here for Chicago residents, Illinois residents, and Ohio residents. To check your registration status, make sure all your information is up to date. And your options are rounded up to these three: voting by mail, going in person for early voting, or going on election day in person. Things to consider, questions that may be relevant even in my case as well. What if you moved and your voting address isn't the same? In that case, you would need to change your address or change your name. You have to re-register. And as for students or college students who are away from home for education, if you are wondering if you can put your campus address as your permanent address, you should register to vote at the place you consider your home. If you consider your on-campus residence to be your permanent home, you can put that as your street address, and that will determine where you will vote. But always, always check your state's residency laws. And updating your voter registration, if you want to change your name, your address, your political party affiliation, again, review your state's registration process. For Illinois residents, you can update your information through the election website. That is the same that we had on the previous slide. Okay, so why do we vote? Why do we get out of our house and vote for two people who we've never met before? Well, from the perspective of a South Asian American, voting is a crucial expression of our identity, our values, and commitment to shaping the society that we live in. As immigrants or descendants of immigrants, our communities have been facing challenges in being recognized and represented in American society. By voting, we assert our right to have a voice in the decisions that affect our lives, our families, and our future. Reason number two would be the value of democracy. Many in the South Asian American community have come from regions where democratic rights have been limited or hard won, making participation in American democracy a vital expression of this hard earned right. Despite diversity in where we come from, we share the common struggles around immigration, discrimination, and access to opportunities. Voting allows us to advocate for policies that protect our rights, ensure equitable treatment, and promote a more inclusive treatment. Whether it's about immigration reform, racial justice, healthcare, or education, we vote to ensure that our unique experiences and needs are taken into account by the people in power. Finally, reason number three, solidarity and inclusion. Voting is an act of solidarity with other marginalized groups, working collectively to create a more inclusive, fair, and just society for all. So in essence, we vote because it is our right, our responsibility, and our power to shape the future. So here are some key issues that we have gathered based on this upcoming election, as well as questions that have been raised during the recent debates. So what are the problems that we face and how have our presidential candidates tackled them? This includes immigration, the economy, healthcare, education, and civil rights. And now for a brief overview of our candidates. First up, we have Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the Democratic candidate for this election. She presents with a historic role as the first Black, South Asian, and female vice president. Her political career began in 2017 as a U.S. Senator up until 2021, where she was also the California Attorney General. And her key focus areas include healthcare, racial justice, climate change, and immigration. But she also faces challenges based on shifts on Medicare for All during her 2020 campaign, and also the economy and inflation issues under the Biden administration. Next up, we have former President Donald Trump, who is a Republican candidate for this election. Trump began as a real estate mogul and the host of The Apprentice. He won the 2016 presidential campaign, but lost in 2020 and claimed voter fraud. His key policies include tax cuts, deregulation, immigration, an America First perspective, and a COVID-19 Operation Warp Speed. In challenges, he has faced several legal issues, including election fraud claims, legal battles, and impeachments. Okay, so now into an in-depth exploration of their issues based on the previous slides. For Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party, she supports a comprehensive reform with a pathway to citizenship. Harris strongly supports comprehensive immigration reform for undocumented immigrants. She advocates for a system that provides legal status to immigrants living in the US who meet specific criteria, including paying taxes, passing background checks, and demonstrating a commitment to the country. She is also a vocal advocate for protecting Dreamers and DACA students, young immigrants who were brought to the U.S. as children under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. She also supports legislation like the DREAM Act, which will provide a permanent pathway to citizenship for Dreamers. Harris also supports policies that prioritize family reunification in the immigration process, ensuring that families separated by immigration enforcement are reunited. As for asylum and refugees, Harris has pledged to restore the asylum system, which she argues was severely restricted under the Trump administration. She supports ensuring that individuals fleeing persecution, violence, and danger in their home countries have access to the U.S. asylum system. In ending family separation, she has opposed that and was implemented during the Trump administration and has vowed to end any policies that result in the separation of families at the border. Harris also supports the increasing number of refugees allowed to resettle in the US each year and has previously criticized the Trump administration for drastically reducing the refugee cap and has advocated for returning refugee admissions to historic levels. Harris has consistently opposed the construction of a border wall between the US and Mexico. She's argued that a wall is an ineffective and costly solution to border security and that resources should be spent on more modern approaches like surveillance technology and staffing. Harris supports border security but advocates for a smart approach that focuses on improving technology, hiring more border agents, and addressing root causes of migration, such as violence and poverty in Central America. She emphasizes a humanitarian approach to border enforcement and has also been critical of ICE raids that target undocumented immigrants, particularly those without criminal records. In this line, she supports to reform the practices to focus on high priority enforcement actions like targeting violent offenders. Harris also supports sanctuary cities, which limit cooperation between local law enforcement and federal immigration authorities, and argues that these policies help build trust between the immigrant communities and local law enforcement, making cities safer. Now on to Donald Trump's views on immigration. He has expressed a strict immigration enforcement, and that includes a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, viewing it as an amnesty and arguing that it rewards individuals who enter the US illegally. Trump sought to end DACA during his presidency, although his efforts were blocked by the courts. While he expressed openness to protecting Dreamers at various points, his administration pursued policies that made their status uncertain. He's advocated for using protections for Dreamers as leverage to secure funding for border wall reconstruction. As for family-based immigration, Trump referred to family-based immigration as chain migration and sought to limit it. His administration favored shifting to a merit-based immigration system, prioritizing highly skilled workers over family reunification. Trump's administration significantly restricted the asylum process, implementing policies like the Remain in Mexico program, which required asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while their claims were being processed. His administration also sought to limit the grounds on which people could claim asylum, focusing on rejecting claims based on gang violence or domestic abuse. One of the most controversial policies of Trump's administration was the family separation policy, which separated children from their parents at the US Mexico border as part of a zero tolerance approach to immigration. Though the policy was officially ended after public outcry, children have already been separated and efforts to reunite families continue long after. For lowering refugee admissions, this is something that Trump has drastically reduced, lowering it to the historic lows during his presidency. His administration argued that the reduction was necessary for national security and to prioritize resources for those who are already in the US. And one of Trump's signature policies during both of his campaigns was the construction of a border wall along the US Mexico border. He's repeatedly promised to build a big, beautiful wall to deter illegal immigration and insisted that Mexico would pay for it, although this did not happen. By the end of his presidency, hundreds of miles of the walls were built or reinforced, though much of it replaced existing fencing. Trump has implemented a zero tolerance policy that resulted in the prosecution of all individuals who cross the US border illegally, regardless of their circumstances. This has contributed to the family separation crisis that sparked widespread controversy and has led to the Trump administration significantly ramping up ICE. This included increased raids targeting undocumented immigrants and expanding the detentions of asylum seekers and other migrants, often in poor conditions. Trump has strongly opposed sanctuary cities and threatened to withhold federal funding from cities and states that refuse to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement. He argued that sanctuary policies protected dangerous criminals and made Americans' communities less safe. Now, on to the economy, another hot point for this election, starting with tax policies. Kamala Harris has supported increasing taxes on corporations and the wealthiest Americans to pay for social programs like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. She has backed initiatives like Biden's proposal to raise the corporate tax from 21% to 28%, while increasing the top individual income tax rate for those earning more than $400,000 annually. She's promoted tax cuts for the middle class and also emphasized reducing wealth inequality through taxation policies that redistribute wealth more equitably. Trump's signature legislative achievement was the 2017 Tax Cuts and Job Acts, the TCJA, which significantly lowered taxes for individuals and corporations. The corporate tax rate was reduced from 35% to 21%, and income taxes were lowered across the board, with the largest benefits going to the wealthiest. Trump's economic philosophy is rooted in trickle-down economics, which is where tax cuts for businesses and wealthy individuals are believed to spur investment, job creation, and overall economic growth. He's expressed opposition to tax increases on corporations of the wealthy, arguing that higher taxes would stifle economic growth and also discourage investment. As for economic growth and jobs, Kamala Harris has advocated for substantial government investments in infrastructure, clean energy, healthcare, and education as ways to stimulate long-term economic growth and create jobs. These initiatives are part of a broader Democratic platform aimed at combating climate change and addressing income inequality. She supports transitioning to a green economy, which she believes will create millions of new jobs in renewable energy sectors like solar, wind, and electrical vehicle production. Her vision ties environmental sustainability with economic opportunity, and she has also emphasized the importance of workers' rights in minimum wage. For Donald Trump, he's prioritized deregulation as a way to spur economic growth by rolling back environmental protections and labor regulations that he believed would stifle business innovation and job creation. His administration has also reduced regulations in the energy sector, financial services, and other industries. He's promoted domestic energy production, particularly fossil fuels like oil, coal, and natural gas, as a means to create jobs and boost the economy. He's also withdrawn the US from the Paris Climate Agreement, which prioritizes domestic economic concerns over global environmental goals. Trump focuses on trade policies like renegotiating NAFTA into the USMCA and imposing tariffs on countries like China. He argued that these moves would protect American jobs and industries, especially in manufacturing and agriculture. For the trade policy, Harris and the Biden administration prefer multilateral trade agreements and alliances, seeing these as ways to compete with China and ensure fair labor and environmental standards globally. Harris supports trade deals that include strong labor and environmental protections, often aimed at protecting American workers from unfair competition and encouraging higher standards in partner countries. She is far less aggressive on tariffs and generally supports resolving trade disputes through diplomatic engagement rather than unilateral tariffs. Again, Trump's trade policy is shaped by his America First agenda, focusing on renegotiating trade benefits to benefit American industries and workers. His administration imposed tariffs on imports from China, Europe, and other countries to protect U.S. manufacturers and reduce trade deficits. He's used he used tariffs as a tool to pressure countries into trade concessions, particularly China, and believed that aggressive trade policies were necessary to protect U.S. interests and reduce reliance on foreign imports. He's preferred bilateral trade agreements over multilateral ones, arguing that the U.S. would secure better deals by negotiating one-on-one with other countries. Starting with healthcare and social spending, Harris has long supported expanding access to healthcare, including strengthening the Affordable Care Act and introducing a public option. Early in her presidential campaign, she supported Medicare for all, although she's later moderated her stance to support incremental reforms. Harris champions robust government programs to reduce poverty and support working families, including expanding paid family leave, childcare, and affordable housing. She sees these as investments in the future workforce. During COVID-19, Harris also supported large-scale government intervention during the pandemic, including direct financial relief to Americans and aid to small businesses. As for Trump, Trump sought to repeal and replace the ACA, favoring a more market-driven approach to healthcare. His administration attempted to reduce government involvement in healthcare by promoting alternatives like health savings accounts and allowing insurance sales across state lines. He aimed to limit the growth of government spending on welfare and social programs, believing that lower taxes and fewer regulations would help people become self-reliant through job creation rather than government aid. As for his response to COVID-19, it was focused on reopening the economy as soon as possible, often opposing prolonged lockdowns and restrictions, arguing that they hurt businesses and workers. For climate and infrastructure investment, Harris supported a version of the Green New Deal, which aimed to address climate change through large-scale investment in clean energy, infrastructure, and technology. Her vision included reducing carbon emissions, modernizing public transportation, and overall improving energy efficiency. She promoted significant government spendings on infrastructure projects from roads and bridges to broadband and clean water, and frames these investments as essential to economic growth and sustainability. Trump's infrastructure plan is focused more on traditional sectors like roads, bridges, and energy pipelines. He's emphasized reducing regulatory barriers to speed up infrastructure projects, but did not prioritize green energy investments. He's rolled back on several environmental regulations, including those aimed at reducing carbon emissions, and was skeptical of climate change science while believing that environmental regulations was an obstacle to economic growth. As for education, Harris has advocated for increasing teacher pay by $13,500 a year. She's been a strong supporter of public schools and federal funding for underserved communities, with a focus on equity, inclusion, and social services in schools. Trump has been a strong proponent of school choice, vouchers, and charter schools. He's advocated for reducing federal control, increasing local control of education, as well as emphasizing a patriotic education in the 1776 Commission and traditional American history. As for higher education, Harris has supported student debt relief and free community college, while increasing funding for HBCUs and minority serving institutions. She's been a strong advocate for Title IX protections on campuses. Trump has opposed broad student debt cancellation but simplified loan repayment plans. He's increased permanent funding for HBCUs and rolled back regulations on for-profit colleges. During COVID-19 and its relationship with schools, Harris was cautious in her approach to reopening and supported remote learning with proper resources. She's also advocated for federal funding for school safety measures. Trump pushed for rapid reopening of schools and emphasized in-person learning. He has also threatened to withhold funding from schools that didn't reopen. In civil rights and its education and its place in schools, Harris has viewed education as a civil rights issue addressing racial and economic disparities. She's focused on reducing the school to prison pipeline. Trump, on the other hand, has focused on school choice as a way to improve education outcomes and has opposed critical race theory and certain diversity training in schools. As for civil rights, Harris stands on racial justice and police reform. She has supported police reform, such as the ban of chokeholds and end qualified immunity, as well as addressing systemic racism. Trump has emphasized law and order and has opposed broad police reform and backing law enforcement. Harris has advocated expanding voting rights, such as the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which fights to end voter suppression. Trump has focused on voter fraud claims, supported stricter voter ID laws, and election oversight. As for queer rights, Harris is a strong advocate for them and supports the Equality Act and transgender protections. Trump has a mixed record where he has also rolled back on transgender protections and banned transgender military service. For women's and reproductive rights, Harris is pro-choice and supports federal abortion protections and gender equality. Trump is pro-life and has appointed several conservative judges sought in seeking to restrict abortion access. Criminal justice reform. Harris has advocated for ending mass incarceration, private prisons, and cash bail. Trump has signed the First Step Act, for criminal justice reform, but emphasized tough on crime policies. And here are several action items where, in the interest of voting, we encourage everyone to take participation in. One is simply registering to vote. Ensure your registration and encourage others. Second is educating yourself and others. Research candidates, do a study on your ballot, and share info with others as well. 3 is volunteering for campaigns such as canvassing, phone banking, poll working, which leads to 4. And for 5, attending community forums. Engage with candidates at town halls and debates if you are able to. Advocate for voter rights. Join organizations that also focus on voter access. Use social media. Share resources and encourage others to vote, but keep in mind and be wary of certain sources. 8 is contacting your representatives to express your views on voter access and issues. 9 is join the Get Out the Vote campaigns. Mobilize voters in your community, as well as the ones that we have in SAAPRI. 10 is providing transportation assistance. Help those who need rides to polling places and be of service. Follow up with your friends and families. Check if they're registered and plan to vote. And also engage post-election. Participate in discussions about outcomes. What happened? How can we fix things for the next election? Okay, and now we will open up to our discussion portion. This will be open to everybody, but please remember to keep it civil. Our question is, what motivates us to vote? This can be an individual question based on your personal history or even what you believe is your reason to vote. I can start off. What motivates me to vote is the protection of my rights. I'm an American citizen, and ultimately, what happens in the election process indirectly and directly influences me. And I would like to have a hand in controlling that. The question is open to everybody.
I can go. Hi everyone. My name is Karan Manohar. And something that motivates me to vote is the ability to participate in democracy and ensure fairness within the process, and just for the protection of future generations as well.
Thank you, Karen. Go ahead and pick somebody else.
Anushka.
I think Anushka is unable to share her audio.
Okay. Then I'll go Francis.
Hi everyone. Let me know if my mic turned on. I think it did. Okay, so what encourages me to vote? I would say that my parents, obviously. My dad has always taught us the importance of civic engagement, either here in the US or in Mexico. We do have dual citizenship, so he has always encouraged being civically engaged, and that with that goes into the voting. Aside from that, I feel like the people around me who are of mixed status, who don't have the opportunity to vote or to have their voice be heard on an official level. So that has always been a pushing factor to make sure I use my voice and when it comes to the elections.
Thank you, Francis.
I'll popcorn to Nakara Monohara Garangola if you're available to speak.
Yeah. So for me, what motivates me to vote is like sort of over the years in college and stuff, I've like understood more and more about the importance of not just like the general election, but also, how local elections can impact communities and how the difference, like the heterogeneity in that within a state and even between states can like severely affect like outcomes for residents. So that's what's been motivating me to care more about not just general election, but also like local elections and stuff. And I will popcorn Montesfini.
I don't think Manasvini is able to come to right now. Shobana, if you're
Okay.
able to, do you want to share your reason or what pushes you to vote?
Sure. In one word, I would say it's a hard-fought right, first of all. We know that people have worked hard. And secondly, this was done for a reason, and this is to not only secure our own rights and get our voices heard, but also secure the future and support people who are not eligible to vote. So when I'm voting, I do think about not just me, but also those who I represent.
Thank you. I think that's everybody who's able to speak. Let me go back. Okay, next question would be how we can encourage civil discussion. Lately, we've been seeing a rise in aggression and hostility, especially when it comes to discussion between two people of opposing parties. While emotion and passion is important, it's also extremely crucial to remember that we are all of us a united country, and it's important to maintain that unity when it comes to our political process. So I guess, from my opinion, how we can encourage civil discussion is beginning with an open mind and placing the importance of learning over our own pride and opinion. Opinions can be changed. They can be changed for the better or the worse, but what's at stake here is our ability to learn and also hear the other person out. And I've also felt, whether that's college campus or even with our own families and inner circles, it can be really difficult when it comes down to certain parts of the process. So I guess one tip for myself and something that I can work on in the next few weeks or so is staying calm and hearing them as much as they are able to speak before throwing in my own voice. So from that, Francis, let's start with you again, if you're okay.
Yeah. So in my experience, just a little background, I have a younger brother and I have a cousin who are both turning 18 this October, so they'll be eligible to vote in the presidential elections in November. So they're pretty new to the political landscape, especially talking about presidencies, administrations. So one way I have like started this discussion is just kind of emphasizing our experience, the experience of our family members. Some of my cousins do come from mixed status families, so just like having time to reflect on what we have experienced in the last couple of years, what we have seen on the news and stuff like that, but also willing to have a safe space where they can ask me questions. And I always tell them like no question is a dumb question, because they always be like, oh Lalis, I need you to ask something, but it's probably like so stupid. I'm like, no, just ask. Like we all started somewhere, we're all curious about these topics, especially if they're big ones that in fact will affect us like years to come. If you're interested in, always make sure there's a safe space for those around you to ask those silly questions, because it may be easy or common knowledge for some of us who've been in the field for X amount of years, who have been organizing since we were like teenagers, but to those just entering the political landscape, there is no dumb question because they're trying to get the field of what's going on. So encouraging open discussion, making it a safe space to ask those silly little questions, and to not be afraid to talk about the different political parties, the different candidates either, because like everybody deserves to know upfront the information that they need to make a civically informed decision when they go out to vote.
Yeah, and going off of that really quickly, I feel like parts that you made about there's no stupid questions. I feel like that's very relevant in today's digital landscape, with the amount of misinformation and conflicting resources and even extraordinary stories that I've heard when I've spoken to friends about this. It's really encouraging civil discussion is really a way where we can eliminate as much misinformation and encourage everybody to be careful of the sources they consume or what they say about certain candidates to other people, rather than icing them out and saying, your opinion sucks because it's fake news or whatever. It can be really rewarding to encourage other people to learn as we go on. So thank you, Francis. You can go ahead and pick somebody else, or if anybody else just wants to chime in.
I'll pick Garamona Harp. You want to go next?
Yeah, I think you both kind of hit it on the head there. I think the only thing I'd add is just kind of staying curious, and kind of like not being so fixated in your positions. I think what's helped me too, and is that like a lot of us who have had opportunities kind of gain knowledge in the political sphere, kind of sometimes get fixated in those kind of in our understanding. But I think the opportunities to kind of engage in discussion and hear out different points of views and staying civil in those kind of moments allow for a lot of understanding kind of on both ways to maybe find common ground. So I think just also meeting people where they're at in their understanding of politics, but also trying to find common ground, um, or trying to seek common ground too. I think a lot of times going to these discussions, it's adversarial. And so I think it's a great opportunity to find common ground in these discussions as well.
Thank you, Karen. Go ahead and pick up somebody else.
I'll pick the other card.
Yeah, I think civility in general is a two-way street, and it sort of has to involve at the baseline like a set of like general like agreed upon language and agreed upon like truths and facts, which I think a lot of times is not the case, or that sort of like equal playing ground is not always given. I think also I've been thinking a lot about like we I think we have a lot of like inflammatory language that is used in like political elections or in general when we talk about political issues. Like, I mean, for example, like, swing states for elections are called like battleground states. Those are like that's like war. Those are like war languages. Calling immigration an invasion, like that's clearly like a war language, and like it's kind of tough to be civil when when a lot of the political messaging we get is like super inflammatory and sort of evokes those sort of emotions. But I think for me, the things I've been thinking about a lot is about language and like factual information, making sure that those are on the same playing field. And I'll pick Shobana.
Sure. This is a good question because I think it's also very challenging, depending on who we talk to. One thing that I always am mindful of and also encourage when we are discussing elections, whether it's local, state, or federal, depending on who we're electing, we do always remind each other, or at least I try to remind myself, is that the way, however we feel about the electoral process or our own participation, or whether or not we feel encouraged to participate or have a conversation around this, also depends a lot on our own experiences, our own life stories, our own identities, and what we represent. So I think being thoughtful about that, not just for ourselves, but also our, people in our network who are trying to engage and trying to have a dialogue, on any particular issue. I think it just helps to be mindful of that, and also sometimes I try on my end. I try not to judge people, and I also encourage that when we're trying to have an open dialogue. Definitely try to engage in conversations with people who have a different viewpoint. As Karan earlier mentioned as well, I think that helps kind of see each other, understand and listen. I think that also encourages if we are not always operating in our own bubbles, but also open to having a dialogue or engaging with people who do have a different viewpoint than our own. So yeah, some of these I think strategies have helped me, but also sometimes I try to set boundaries, right? Like, let's be respectful, let's agree to disagree, and we're just having a conversation to give each other an opportunity to share how we feel and how what we believe in, the issues we care about. And I think those are some of the areas where I feel it's more, it's helpful to have a conversation when we're talking about particular issues, and having an open dialogue and being respectful of each other's viewpoints and space. I think that helps as well.
Couldn't have said it better myself. If nobody else has something they want to pitch in with this question, or even another question that they were hoping to discuss, this is a completely neutral space. Just leave a minute for that. If there's no other questions, we can go ahead and officially conclude. Thank you so much for attending and listening. Baseline is please get out there, please register to vote. It matters, even if you think it's insignificant. It's always important to include yourself in this electoral process. So yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or anyone at SAAPRI. We would love to help. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody.